Professional Serving Community, talkradio.nyc.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Marsanico. Welcome to the A Train to Sedona broadcast. The A Train to Sedona is also a book I wrote, a memoir about my road to love and compassion. In it, I share my failures and my successes, and I wrote the book so that my journey could inspire yours. My hope is that your journey would be more efficient and easier for you. You can buy a signed copy of the A Train to Sedona on my website at lindamarsanico.com. You can also buy it at retail and bookstores. Now let's remember that in New York City, the A Train is an express train, so hop on board. I have a free gift for you, the cheat sheet for high vibration living. Now this world has been dramatic and chaotic, and it puts us off balance. These 7 exercises can help you bring your energy, your vibration to where you want it. There are exercises to bring you to the present moment. There's a guided meditation, a walking meditation, one to have you surround yourself in violet light. And you can download a free copy at lindamarsanico.com. I have 2 disclaimers. One, that this broadcast does not create a professional relationship. And 2, that the opinions expressed here do not represent Talk Radio New York City. Today, I have as my guest, Cali Alpert. Cali Alpert is a 3-time Emmy-winning interviewer, producer, and podcast host who has created content for multiple networks such as NBC, Discovery, E!, Sony, and Fox. Platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, Dodo, E! Online, Spotify, and TV hosts such as Jane Pauley, Meredith Vieira, Dr. Oz. Her deep listening and adept question-asking skills have garnered her a reputation for heartstring storytelling and intimate conversations from which listeners can gain wisdom, access their own vulnerability, laugh, cry. Cali's subjects range from Sheryl Crow to Richard Branson, Deepak Chopra to Halle Berry, war vets to agoraphobics, and everyday heroes to incarcerated mothers. Her knowledge of psychology, spirituality, and the personal growth space blend to create soulful storytelling across the board. Her new life guidance business is called The Inner Viewer, where she merges her intuitive questioning and personal healing journey and wisdom gathered from years in the personal growth space to help individual clients and groups find new ways to their more or most joyful selves. Welcome, Cali.
Thank you, Linda. It's so nice to be here. That was like a "this is your life" walk down memory lane. Thank you for that.
Oh, you've had quite a lot of stellar experiences. And I was wondering, when you think of yourself from the age of college, what would you consider the influences to bring you to where you are as you sit here with us today?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you for that question as to get us into this conversation today. Oh my Lord. Probably everything, every moment. That might sound like a bit of a throwaway answer. Um, College itself was the first time that kind of broke out of being a good behaved, academically oriented little girl, which might be counterintuitive to going to college. And certainly I worked hard, but I also played really hard. And it was the first time in my life I was more of a free spirit and found
Mm,
that part of me. I'd always been a little bit more fearful and anxiety ridden and contained and um, yeah, just smaller and more specific in my presentation and my behavior and the level of freedom that I enjoyed as a personality, as a human.
mhm.
So that was a big door opener. And then I would say the very first thing after college was the first travels I did to first travels period in any sort of real global way, except for some travel I'd done domestically as a child with my family and in North America, but went to Europe for a few months with a friend slash boyfriend of the time. And that was my first taste of the world and just the magic of what it means to be around different cultures and different people. Not living inside, pardon me, not living inside of a paradigm that sort of dictated what I should be doing with my days, from going to being a student to knowing I was an aspiring working woman. This was the in between chapter of that. Um, and that travel, which led to many crazy adventures and many stories that I won't take too much of our time with right now, was just an eye opener for me and made me realize how much I love the world and how curious I was about other parts of the world. And it was a springboard for a lot of traveling that I ended up doing years later and for many years. I haven't as much recently, but I am a
Mhm.
big traveler, gypsy spirit, and that woke it up. I didn't know that that was in me to the degree that it was. So I would say that that actually was one of the bigger influencers in me and just the life trajectory that I jumped onto.
So that trip to Europe after
Mm,
college was this Pandora's box of
mm.
venture and the expression of who you are in a bigger world.
Yeah, exactly. It was. It wasn't. Um, I mean, we could say probably that it, in some ways, perpetuated or drove forth my curiosity about people and their stories, which is very much what as just so beautifully introduced, what led to my professional life, which
Hmm.
actually started, those seeds started even when I was a little kid. I was with microphones and my teddy bears interviewing
Ah,
people. So I always knew, or my soul always knew on some level, even if I didn't know intellectually what I was driven toward. But yes, I would say that just the world opening up and just meeting lots of characters, learning more about myself, um, learning more about the world, cultural places, iconic places, history. This was a time I graduated college in 1985. And so I'm sorry, yes, in 1985, it was a long time ago. Um, but anyway, it was before the Berlin Wall came down, for example. So we were in Germany on both sides of the wall at that time. And that was a very telling experience, but it was a little lost on me because I was a little naive then.
mm-hmm.
Thankfully, the friend I was traveling with was way smarter than I was with all matters of the world, and I got educated pretty quickly. But a lot of it was more because I was there experiencing what it was like to be in a supermarket in East Berlin in 1985, um, and just how people were living. So those types of realities, just as one example of what later would become some very deep and humbling and powerful and poignant experiences in all corners of the world. I would say that's what first opened me up. And I think I say this a lot to people when I'm mentoring or speaking, especially to young women, if I need to kind of generalize, that I think it's probably one of the most informing experiences anybody can have is traveling.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially for women alone, at least when I started to do it more on my own throughout the years that followed this particular trip, it was extremely powerful and educational and informative. Yeah, really shaped who I am on a lot of levels and ultimately tied back to my professional career because it just sparked and underscored how curious I was about things and about people and the way they lived and what their stories were.
You mentioned traveling alone.
Mm.
Did you go by yourself solely to, where did you go by yourself?
When I was so this is now if we jump forward, let's see, how old was I then? It's so funny to think back to these chapters of my life. Um, it wasn't I pine so in my after that trip and then getting into the earlier parts of my career, I started to ogle travel brochures to all kinds of far-reaching places. And I was always waiting for the right opportunity, the perfect person, the right boyfriend, the right friend to go with. And when a lot of years went by for some of these bigger trips that I was dreaming of, envisioning, that, whoever that perfect travel companion was didn't show up, I decided it was silly for me to continue to wait
Hmm.
and I was wasting time. And what am I waiting for? And I literally jumped on an airplane to India, Nepal, and went by myself. I'm sorry, I went to Costa Rica first by myself. This was back in the early 90s before there was any infrastructure. And I got myself into all kinds of situations, driving with, and my Spanish had to come back very quickly just as a survival mechanism because it was always a safe, beautiful place, but there was no infrastructure at the time the way there is now there. So no like traffic lights. It was make a left at the volcano and cross your fingers and hope that I just remember a lot of darkness and a lot of random roads that weren't developed and trying to find my way. After that, I went to India and Nepal and I went trekking in the Himalayan mountains. But so these were trips that I did by myself, jumped on an airplane, had long layovers in airports that were very daunting. Got to Kathmandu, found myself a Sherpa to go trekking in the Himalayan mountains for a handful of days.
Mm.
Um, and then it went from there. I traveled a lot around the world by myself. I did.
It sounds like that's part of your personal growth.
I think it probably is one of the more important parts of my personal growth, especially again early on when when I was still finding myself and didn't have as much life experience as I do now in my early 60s.
Mhm.
Um, so many things have to develop in those situations, right? Just between your confidence, your awareness, your mechanisms, your keeping an eye out for yourself for safety, from safety purposes. Not that I
Mhm.
put myself in any abjectly dangerous or reckless situations, but certainly you always have to be aware and mindful. And I was going to a lot of developing countries because I was very drawn to them. And
Mm.
so they were really beautiful, powerful experiences where I met lots of people. And that's when I started to learn the magic of synchronicity and the people I would meet that I knew I might have met them in the middle of an obscure desert in Morocco, but it ends up that our cousins are, I'm making this part up. I'm not getting
Yeah.
too detailed, the specifics, but I'd, something would circle back and I'd meet up with them again coincidentally. And I put that in quotes because I don't believe in coincidences in New
Yes.
York City a month later when I didn't even live in New York City anymore. I was living in LA at the time. So I have a lot of really huge sort of serendipitous global stories that are
Hmm.
real wild. Um, and in and of themselves are great stories, but they also reminded me of just the magic of when you follow what your heart desires and you are relaxed and you sink into what's calling you, that there's always magic that's holding you. And
Yeah.
so those were huge, very deep personal growth experiences for me.
We have to take a break soon, but I'm wondering when we get back if you would tell us a story about something on your travels. I know you have lots of stories. How does
I
that sound?
do. I'll try to summon one up during the break. How's that?
Sounds fabulous. Anyway, we can go on to break now, and we'll be back with a personal story from Cali Alpert.
Are you a conscious co creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high achieving, growth oriented leader? Are Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona with my guest, Cali Alpert. And I'm so looking forward to the story that you're going to share with us.
Thank you for digging a little deeper. I was breezing over not to hide anything, but because I just wanted to, I didn't want to take up too much time. This is probably one of my top 2 or 3 favorite global serendipity stories, and I'll try to consolidate it to the best of my ability. When I went on that trip to India and Nepal, it was prompted by an old friend who was a travel writer who I knew from the United States, who had said, "Oh, why don't you come to India in a few months? I'll be there. I'll have a friend or 2 with me. You'll find me in this rice paddy on this day." Like literally, it was kind of like
This rice paddy.
it was kind of pretty obscure. It wasn't, it was obscure and fun and very adventurous. And so I did, and I ended up meeting his friend, and he and I ended up falling in love, having a vacation romance, and then it launched into a 5-year intercontinental relationship. This particular person was living in Prague in the Czech Republic, and I was living in Los Angeles. I was very, very broke and very unemployed, but I had a lot of time on my hands. It was during the early stages of my television career, and one of the periods of like less employment. So we were back and forth a lot between those 2 places to be able to have time together. On one trip, I had a layover in London. And this was before 9/11, when I was working in the entertainment television profession. And so I had business cards at E-Entertainment Television, in this case, that were able, sometimes got me upgrades if I schmoozed in the right way on the right day. And so I sat in business class. I ended up next to a young man, pardon me, who had also was not intending to be in that seat, but he got upgraded because he was having some back issues. He was from New Zealand originally, living in London. He was going back to New Zealand to say goodbye to his ailing father, and I was flying back to Los Angeles to go home. We had a very poignant, powerful 11 hours on this plane flight. Tears, music, telling life stories, sharing woes and travails. It was very intimate and very intense and platonic. He was married. I was in love with my boyfriend. We got off the plane in Los Angeles. At the airport, we didn't exchange. It didn't feel like an appropriate, necessary thing to do. Said goodbye with that kind of sideways, this was powerful, and thank you, and wishing you well. And that was it. 3 weeks later, I come back to New York to visit my family and be back in New York. I'm from New Jersey originally, to be with my family for a birthday. We're at a restaurant that we picked to have dinner or brunch or whatever it was in New York City in the Flatiron District. And who walks over to my table? But this person from the airplane. He had gone to New Zealand. He had said goodbye to his dying father. He was on his way back to London and pit stopped in New York City for 3 days to see some friends. So I have goosebumps because it was way more poignant than that. At the time, I'm rushing to give you the nuts and bolts of the story. And then from there, we actually did end up keeping in touch and seeing each other periodically when we were in the other's respective city. But that was one of many stories. And it just, again, to me, synchronicities and serendipities. Yes. I'm not a believer in coincidences. I believe that everything is divinely orchestrated. And besides whatever was the reason he and I were meant to bump back into each other again, it reminded me of the power of, on a larger level, of what happens again when you live your life, when you melt into a larger energy, a larger frequency, by
Yes.
doing things that are just organic and bring you
Mhm.
joy and bring you gratitude. When you put yourself in those situations and you say
Mhm.
yes, there's magical things that happen. And to me, synchronicities are a confirmation of that.
Yes, it's a beautiful story. Are you still in touch with this person?
Haven't been, no, not in many years. We were for a good amount of years, and then we lost track. Yeah.
So maybe you won't anymore, but if there's any unfinished dynamic, you may run into him. You never know.
You never know.
But perhaps you
True.
you got closure from the restaurant and being in touch and were supportive of each other. It's just a very beautiful story. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
sharing it,
Thanks
Callie.
for asking.
I wonder if you could share the role of spirituality in your life.
Mm, it's the most important thing to me. Um, so important and so deeply in my DNA and my body that it's hard to talk about it. And I might have gotten a little bit more reticent over the years because these words and terms and ethos have gotten more popularized, which is a beautiful thing. But sometimes I get a little like, oh, do I want to be one of those people that's over talking these words?
Mhm, mhm,
That said, for me, it started very early. I have very clear recollections as a young child of knowing I grew up Jewish in a semi-observant household, not very religious. But I also separately remember knowing that there was somebody at the time I thought it was a person or a being that was overseeing everything that was happening here in our silly lives here on Earth. Up in the sky, which is not where I
mhm,
believe it all lives right now, but it's natural to, look up.
mhm,
And then, and I just kind of carried that with me. It wasn't very developed. I didn't study it or really dig into it too deeply at that point. When I was in my early 20s, after college, starting my work career in New York City, I was dating a young man who was carrying crystals in his pocket
mm,
and had lost a sibling. And so he was delving into his healing process in this way. And it turned me on to seminars. I would go to angel seminars, and
mhm,
I didn't even know, it's kind of interesting because when you're just starting out, you're not really on a specific path in terms of checking the boxes of what type of modalities you're checking into or
mhm,
what classes you're taking or what books you're reading. It just kind of starts to happen.
mhm,
At least it did for me. And then it went from there. I mean, it was really a combination of a deep therapeutic process that I got into in my 30s, coming out of relationships that were not healthy with men and reenacting old dynamics with my family of origin that, take a
mhm.
lifetime sometimes to unpack and
Yes, yes.
to soften. I won't say they ever go away, but they soften. You make better friends with them, right? So it was kind of a combo platter for me. My therapeutic process was helping me to kind of gut out feelings and make more space for the spiritual piece to come in, which is
Yes.
I'm a huge believer in. Even now, when I talk to my clients and mentorees, I'm a big believer that you can't just focus on spirituality and do like the bypass. You have to also gut out the real human stuff because we're in human body,
Yes.
right? We're in
Yes.
human experience. And that comes with a lot of feelings and traumas and stuff and neuroses and all those fun things. Um, so it just kind of gently evolved. And then I started digging deeper. I had beautiful teachers that would start to show up, therapists that I'm deeply grateful for. Um, and then I started working more. I'm kind of jumping because it's such an interesting question to really think about, to go backwards and think about what the path has been, because there's no clear marker, where you can say, or at least for me, where I can say, oh, this was a revelation and then it led me to this. It's been like a slow evolution with a lot of breakthroughs and turning corners and then digging deeper. But I can say, like in my 20s, it was just a concept. In my 30s, it was more therapeutic and psychological than it was spiritual. And then in my 40s and 50s, it became more deeply spiritual, where I guess I just started to make more space for my desire for divinity and having more of a relationship and an embodiment of that instead of just thinking about it intellectually, because there's such a big difference. I think people get really lost sometimes in the intellectualizing of spirituality. And then it's a different thing to really embody it and live it
Every
and
day.
right. Yeah. And also just to learn what mindfulness is and presence. And, I started going on retreats and finding more people that were spiritually minded that could teach me or support me. Early on, I remember feeling kind of lonely about it. Because I thought I was one of the only people on the planet, and you feel like you're the only person on the planet that thinks or feels the way you do. But so many of us feel that way. And it's a beautiful thing when years later you can realize that. So yeah, that's the gist. But I would say my deepest spiritual work has been in the last 10 years, my 50s.
So personal growth and spirituality are intertwined, would you say?
I would. Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. For me, they have been sort of one and the same. And it doesn't mean that that's all there is. Personal growth can come in so many different forms. It doesn't have to be from spirituality per se. I believe that personal growth is spiritual,
Yes.
but there's so many different versions of what personal growth can be, right? Whether it's just learning to meditate or learning how to slow down or learning how to sleep better, taking care of yourself. But I guess for me, they all fall under the umbrella of spirituality, to different degrees.
Yes. Would you say something about your work as interviewer?
Yes. Thank you for asking. So theinterviewer.net is my website. Interviewer being a play on being an interviewer, INNER viewer, thanks to my partner who came up with that name. And it's a culmination of my many years as an interviewer, interviewing hundreds, if not thousands, I'll say hundreds, I don't want to exaggerate, of people of all walks of life. Earlier in my career, it was celebrities and rock stars, graduated to real people with all kinds of really beautiful and fascinating stories and stories to share and issues to heal from, to subcultures, to more recently, spiritual luminaries in the wellness world. That's where I've been really for the last 10, 15 years. And so they, I would say that they have really helped and formed this particular pursuit because I have a reserve of collective wisdom that I've had the honor of gathering from all these wise and smart and achieved change makers, combined with the fact that I've been working in the wellness industry for 10, 15 years now in very, different ways. And my own personal healing journey, which has been a very deep one, having been raised by a mentally ill mother and a complicit father, both of whom I love very much, but definitely brought a serious ride with it.
Yes.
And my understanding of ancient wisdom traditions through this process has all culminated to this offering now that I have, which is the interviewer.net, where I do one-on-one life guidance sessions with people to help them through my series of question asking, sort of intuitive question asking, to help them unlock their own answers. Some people would call it therapy. Some people would call it life coaching. I'm not certified in any of those things, but that's what people feel like when they have the experience of me. And then I also offer legacy interviews. I help people with coming up with their own personal story narrative for their own life, if they need it professionally or if they want to find their own voice personally. They're not comfortable in settings where they feel empowered to communicate in the way that they want to. I can help them with that as well. So that's just a little taste.
Lovely. We are ready for a break. When we come back, will you say something about the legacy, what did you call it? The legacy something? that you work with your clients to develop a legacy interview?
Oh, I can talk a little bit more about that if you'd like. Absolutely.
I'd like to hear
Be
about
happy
that.
to. Yeah, of course.
All right. So we're off to a break and we'll be back to learn more about legacy interviewing.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona with my guest, Cali Alpert. Cali, do tell us about this legacy situation.
Well, first of all, I'm a firm believer that we all have a story. Everybody has a story to tell. Whether you share it with the world or share it with your family or share it with your relatives is very individual, right? But I believe that everybody has something significant and more important in their lives or more important to share than they might even realize or recognize. As we've already talked about, I spent the last, 30, 35 years facilitating other people's stories. And when I started in entertainment programming and I was interviewing celebrities and rock stars and all that kind of fun, glamorous material. And then I moved on to real people, as I call them in quotes, more everyday people with everyday stories and extraordinary stories at that. And I found that that's really where my deeper interest lies. So now all these years later, as my TV career has kind of waned, and in some ways I've aged out of it, frankly, a little bit, even though I still, do freelance work occasionally and I'm open to it. I found that there's a lot of people that want to share their own stories for their own posterity to have for them, for their families. And so legacy interviews, which is a part of what I offer is on theinterviewer.net. It's just a part of a tentacle of the business. Is interviews where people can, it can do it in all kinds of different forms. But it's really just a way to get your life story down and to be asked what I would like to think are pretty insightful and deeper probing questions that you can have either to use for a memoir that you want to write, or to leave for your relatives, or as a personal exercise in your own psychological growth. The intention really for me doesn't matter, although people have a variety of different intentions. The process is the same, which is to give somebody a voice in a way that they might not have had it before, and then to have a final product to kind of walk away with. So,
and do they come away with a CD or a video? How do you arrange that?
I do it. There's a few different ways. You can do it on Zoom, just as like a Zoom recording. That's a video and audio.
Yeah.
It can do just audio. It really just depends on what someone's preference is.
Mm-hmm.
I do know people. I'm not so much in the business of this. There are people that do it way more in depth because they're focused solely on that, where they'll collect old archival materials and photo albums and family pictures and put together a real proper biography, beautiful cinematic creation. I'm capable of doing that because it's my experience, but it's not where my offerings lie right now. Yeah. So, and I advise having it in both formats, because if you have it on video and audio, you can always strip the audio and just use that type of file.
Mhm.
But I think, and also, I also think it's an interesting exercise in self-growth. A lot of people don't like to look at themselves or listen to themselves. And so
Mm.
while it's not my place to force that, I think it's, I encourage it, because I think it's literally a mirror, right? Of looking back at
Mhm.
yourself and hearing yourself talk about your highlights of your life experience and outstanding stories and philosophies and lessons.
Yes, yes, it sounds amazing. Callie, what aspect of your work do you treasure the most? In the past, in the present?
Hmm. Oh, well, I said to a friend recently, as I was encouraging her to revisit the idea of therapy for her own well-being, and I was going on a little bit of a rant about how instrumental it's been in my life. I can't imagine not having, and I'm still actively always in some modality of therapy or learning, or um, I would say my inner work is my biggest accomplishment, frankly.
Mm.
And I don't know, that might not be what you're asking, so I don't mean to be cute about it, but I'm happy to answer from a more professional standpoint too. But I would say that that's probably my biggest accomplishment. My partner and I joke a lot about our inner currency, like when you have
Mhm.
hard won wealth internally from your life lessons, from challenges, from travails, from
Yes.
growing up and having to, for me more specifically, um, having to even learn that I had trauma,
Mhm.
psychological and emotional trauma. We all do to some degree. So I'm not alone here, certainly.
Yes,
And
that's
a lot
true.
of people have way worse degrees, and then other people have more gentle degrees of it. Um, but I would say that's been my biggest learning. And given who I am as a very deep, very feeling, highly sensitive human and an
Mhm.
empath, an idealist, trying to find my way in a world where I didn't really feel like there's a place, having to kind of, I won't say unlearn that, but find a more holistic way to live in this world being made that way.
Mhm.
When I was younger, being encouraged to be more pragmatic and not be so
Mhm.
sensitive and all those things.
Mhm.
That's just one little piece of it. Large, long times of loneliness, singleness, scarcity.
Mhm.
Um, I just and again, just how I'm made and the devotion that I have given to my inner therapeutic and psychological work, like I've really dug deep.
Mhm.
And I'm really proud of that, because I think that that's one of the more courageous acts we humans can take, is to look at ourselves in the mirror and to get to know ourselves better. I also think the world would be better if
Absolutely.
we all got to know ourselves better. So that's probably my biggest accomplishment. Um, Professionally, which may be what you're maybe what you're really asking.
Before you say that, I want to say that the inner work is really the purpose for being on earth, in my opinion.
Mm, yeah, I do
So
too.
it's the treasure, it's the heart and the soul of our purpose, and how wonderful that you take it so seriously and have grown so much. And yes, I would
Thank you.
like to hear about the professional aspect as well.
Yeah, thank you. And also, just want to button that up. I really feel like I do agree with you. I think that that's why we're here. I
Mhm.
could talk to all my beliefs, kind of Vedantic beliefs in karma and samskaras, and being here to live out and heal our stories that we bring from other lifetimes. And
Yes.
but that's all just like semantics. It doesn't matter. It's really just like healing our stuff, I believe, is why we're all here, and
Mhm.
learning that. I call it earth school, that there's a curriculum, and
Yes,
when it's
yes.
time to graduate, you leave your body. I really firmly believe that. And I do believe that, again, like the greatest act that we can really adhere to kind of become better people and to help others, is to dig into our own psyche. So that aside, professionally, oh my goodness, wow, that's really you'd think that would be such a simple question to kind of recall, like what moment was the most. I've had a lot of, for me, probably it's been moments. I mean, I could talk about accolades and awards, and I just am looking over. I have my 3 Emmys right over
Oh,
here that I just
congratulations.
thank you. And I say it not because, you know, I had them in storage for almost 5 years. I haven't seen them because my life has been a little more transitory in the last few years. And so I purposely made a point of digging them out when I recently relocated my storage and didn't go through most of my things. Those just to remind me of what I still have inside of me from creative juice and professional ability, because sometimes I've lost my way with that and felt like I maybe am dried up and not, you know, not so much going on anymore professionally when you
That
have
can't
those
be true.
moments.
Yeah, that can't be
I
true.
know better now, but I had to remind myself. So that's why they're sitting over there. And a Buddha that I dug out that was also very important to me. Those are my 2 things, and my photography, my creative endeavors. So I would say, but beyond that would really be the moments that I had with people where I could see that in my process of interviewing them, something got unlocked, where they had an awareness, where we had a moment where I was able to give a voice to somebody who was otherwise voiceless. I've had plenty of stories I've done of people that were really on the margins. And if I had the opportunity, number one, to make them feel a little less lonely and a little more seen and heard, and then also giving them a platform to, you know, to empower themselves in whatever way, those would be my highlights. Now, it's a different sort of highlight that is because I'm in a transitional place with my career again, having been laid off a year ago from my last job and being asked by whomever, larger power, to figure it out again and start over at this stage in my life, and trying to pull together all the pieces of my knowing and my experience and whatever hard-won wisdom to share with other people. So anytime that I have the opportunity to do that, for example, with my clients, or when I even have a new door open where someone is interested in me coming in and doing a workshop, because I'm also doing mindful communication workshops. I did a few test runs at the local university here in the Hudson Valley. I would say I'm on my way to another highlight, even if I'm not like shining and glowing and celebrating it every day, because it's still scratching away. So yeah, I would say those are a few examples.
And what courage to be shifting. Um, Having all your experience brings with all of your experience, you bring a lot to the shift. But of course, it's the unknown. And that's the highlight of personal growth, to be on the edge of our comfort zone. It's not easy. It's challenging and sometimes scary.
To say the least, you're absolutely right. It's the my beautiful teacher and dear friend always reminds me of, you know, the being the importance of being okay with the being nowhere and being nobody is kind of a little mantra that we have, you know, that I have in my head. Ram Dass, the beautiful teacher and iconic spiritual wonder. I don't even know what to how to describe Ram Dass, who was very highly responsible for bringing a lot of Eastern spirituality to the United States. Has it was a book or just a documentary. I can't remember if it was both, called, you know, Becoming Nobody. It's definitely a documentary. It's a beautiful documentary that's online, and I can't remember if it was based on a book or not.
Is it about him?
It's his story, but it's about becoming nobody. So it's about
Wow.
shedding all of the layers and the identities and the things and the attachments and the I'm important because I do this and I've achieved that and I'm attached to this person and my bank account says this. It's about shedding all of that so that we can just get to the basic core of who we are and the true beingness. So to your point about being nowhere or being, my words, being nobody, I think it's probably the most important sacred aspiration we can have if you're on a spiritual path. There's a lot of people that would think I'm kooky to even use these terms. But people that speak this language are spiritual aspirants.
Yes.
Would, you know, would probably agree that it's at least a goal. Whether we get
Yes.
there or not in this lifetime is a different story, right?
To be simple, to be loving, to be humble, to be grateful. to be true to self. And of course, the journey is within.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that, it is around that time to take a break. But when we come back, I'd like to ask you what it was like to receive 3 Emmy Awards.
I'm happy to share another story or two with you. Thank you.
Okay. And so we can take our break right now.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona with my guest, Cali Alpert. And I realized, Cali, we were talking about being humble and being simple and being grateful. And then I jumped to, tell me what it was like to get an Emmy 3 times in a row.
And boy, do I have an egoless story for you, Linda. Not, but I'm still unabashed about sharing it. So this is all when I was working on the Dr. Oz show. I worked there. I helped launch the show in the field department. There's in talk show world, there's a studio area where the guests come in, and that's the primary part of the hour of whoever's on the show. And then there's the field unit, which are those of us who are kind of like, we're almost like filmmakers or mini documentarians that are going out into people's lives and getting kind of the pre-story, the backstory. I won't say too much about Dr. Oz these days. I don't want to get too political, but I will say that he and the show were very hard. It was a difficult show to work on, but at that time when I knew him, it was a really beautiful and authentic experience with a lot of integrity. I'll leave it all there for now. It's but I just sometimes I feel like I have a need to disclaim my past with that part of my life. So these shows were primarily field shows. They were not the typical shows we did, and I certainly can't take credit for these were like the whole show team working. I had a lot of guidance and supervision on it. Like there's specific episodes that get submitted for Emmys, like they do for all kinds of award shows. So it wasn't about the show as a whole. It was about specific episodes, and they were all very field heavy. They had to do with going to having clinics in areas of the country where at the time their health insurance was very challenged, and giving people a lot of help and attention medically from him and his team that these different areas were not typically privy to. Anyway, so that's just about the material for the show. So the Emmys were hosted. They were broadcast in different ways with different potency each year. We were nominated while I was there over the course of 5 years. We were nominated, I guess, 5 or 6 times for those seasons, and then won 3. They went on, I believe, to win more after I left the show. But the broadcasting and the profile of the experience of going to the Emmys changed every year. So when I was there early on, there was still a lot more. They were handled by CBS. They were broadcast. There was more money. The whole team was flown out there. And so the second year we didn't win, and we were all ready with our makeup and our dresses, and the Sony was kind enough to support us and glamming us up and the whole thing, putting us up at nice hotels, and it was really a fun experience. By the third time that we went back, hoping that we'd all win this time, I and probably some of my colleagues, because we were a bunch of high-tempered women that were on the field producing team, had already sussed out what happens when you win and you're called up on the stage. What's the camera shot and who gets seen? How many heads, how many faces? If you have a team of 20 people, whose mom's going to see them and whose mom isn't going to see them? I had it all sussed out. So thankfully we won, and we ran up, and I knew exactly where I wanted my not so little head to be. And I was very successful at it, and got to wave to my friends in TV land and the whole thing. But a great honor, a very exhilarating. I think after that, years later, the whole presentation waned and it got smaller. I think they might have been broadcast only online, and then maybe not broadcast at all. I can't remember all the details. But it was fun. It was a fancy experience. It was the daytime Emmys. So we were sharing the stage and sort of the evening with a lot of soap opera performers. And I didn't watch soap opera, so I didn't really know who anybody was. I just knew they all looked great. The ones I was at were in Vegas. So not being a Las Vegas girl, not having a lot of experience there, it was fun and sort of an aberration to have that kind of abundance and opulence around for a few days. And it was lovely. It was really lovely. But I just laugh when I think about the strategy. I'm looking at my little Zoom frame now, and it's about the comparable to the way we were strategic about making sure we were seen in a mob of heads accepting an award behind him. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
I wondered what it feels like to be interviewed.
Wow, thank
right
you.
Now. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's so nice. It's really nice. It's easier and harder. Historically, I've always had an easier time asking and a harder time talking about myself. But that's very deep. That goes back to all kinds of mechanisms in me that had an easier time being interested in other people or asking the questions versus feeling like I had something to say that was noteworthy. Or you were asking me before the show, before we went on live today, about the show that I did for Talk Radio NYC, this very network, back in 2017, 2018. And my co-host at the time, we were doing a half-hour show, and we weren't interviewing people. And my co-host asked me, like, let's go to an hour, and let's just it be you and I. And I remember very consciously saying, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't know that we're interesting enough or have that much to say. And thankfully, he, with his nudging and also us interviewing people and kind of growing and expanding the format of the show, I grew into talking more about me and my own experience and realizing maybe I did have something valuable to say. After all these years now of having been a storyteller, story facilitator, helping other people tell their stories, I'm more committed to telling mine because I'm realizing that there is a pretty thick story in there. And as my mom is actually on her very final decline right now, it's a very deep culmination of 61 years of an extremely informative, well, who doesn't have informative experiences in their family, but a very deep story that once I can get it out of my body, want to share. And so this process helps me, and I thank you for this opportunity, and for this conversation, because it helps to get that flow going, because it's not my historic conditioning. So thank you for being a part of it.
Of course. And you are so articulate, and you have so much to share, Cali. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
On the show with me. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about spiritual explorer.
Oh, because I use that term sometimes on my social media, or wow, these are good curveball questions. I like this. I think the reason that I came up with it, frankly, was probably because I needed to have some more clever short monikers for social media when my social media helper was trying to get me online, and I was promoting different interview shows I was doing. That was the impetus. But I think so, spiritual explorer, I used to call myself a seeker. And then in my own process, I realized that none of us are, we might think we're seekers, but really everything's already here. It's already inside of us.
Yes.
And it's really more about shedding and just getting back to revealing it to ourselves, like an onion, or I call it an artichoke, because you get back to the heart of things, right? When you peel the layers.
Yummy.
It was my food analogy. So I would say that that's sort of what spiritual explorer means to me, is just being on a path back to remembering ourselves and all that embodies, and all the different directions and paths. We go in this big maze, right? And we choose to go left to this retreat, and right to that relationship, and through this door to reading a book, or making a big mistake, or having difficult tragic, crisis in our lives. But then we also always emerge on the other side of the maze, regardless of which way we take. So I would say that somehow that visual is popping in, and that to me kind of embodies or encapsulates what spiritual explorer is.
I'm going to always associate it with the artichoke. I love food. And when you get to the artichoke's end, you get to the heart, which is really where the journey is. It's such a beautiful journey to be heartfelt and to be directed by the heart. So I want to thank you so much for being with me today. How can people find you?
So the best place to find me is my current website, which is the Innerviewer, INNER viewer.net. There's a contact information there if anybody would like to talk further or like to reach out for a free consult for any of my offerings. There's my bio and some information and pictures of some of my interviews that I did most recently with Omega Institute. That's where I was for 4 years. And that's the best place. I'm on social media, but not very actively. I have, on Instagram at Cali Alpert.
Thank you,
and
Cal.
Facebook. Yeah.
As we close for today, I want to say that next week is going to be a very unusual format for me. You're going to tune in and see Linda Marsanico. I'm going to talk about my biography, give some information on the development of my book, what I was experiencing in writing it. I'm going to tell stories about Sedona that are not in the book. I'm going to read from different stories, including reflections, which are at the end of each chapter, which are so light and airy and sort of encapsulate the chapter. So I look forward to seeing you next week at 12 noon on Wednesday, January 15. Cali, as I said, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. Blessings to you for the new year, Linda.
Blessings to you too, and to all the listeners.